Hi folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we take a look at music, movies, art, and culture. And this time, we're going to be taking a look at the self-titled debut EP of a band called The Brilliancy. It really gets on my nerves that so many mainstream critics dismiss pop music. Oh, certainly not as often as they used to, but more often than not, music critics tend to look down on pop and country music and other genres that cater to mainstream radio with a certain condescension that just drives me off the wall. Not only is it ignorant of history and denigrates the genres, it also places their genres of choice, often indie acts, on a higher pedestal. And the more I think about it, the more I become increasingly convinced that said pedestal isn't always earned. Sure, there are plenty of indie acts that are pushing boundaries and making interesting artistic statements, but just because they might adopt a less commercially successful or accessible aesthetic doesn't give them a complete pass if their lyrics or instrumentation aren't compelling or interesting or well thought out. And when we circle back to the topic of good pop music, the conversation gets even trickier. What most people don't tend to realize is that good pop music of any kind still requires a fair amount of talent to write and produce. And the formula for getting it right is constantly changing as the mainstream evolves. In that element, I'd argue indie rock actually has it easier. Without having to worry about mainstream airplay, they have the freedom to push boundaries and write songs about any topic under the sun, whereas pop music doesn't quite have that degree of flexibility. So what makes good pop music? Well, like all art, there's no defined formula for getting it right, but I think I've managed to nail down to three central concepts: solid instrumentation and production, good lyrics and vocal personality, and sincerity. Most pop music can get mainstream airplay with 2, maybe 1.5 out of 3, but the best, most memorable pop songs of them all get all of these right, and I cannot stress how important these elements are. Simply getting 1 out of 3 might get you a passable song, but nothing more than that, and certainly nothing that's going to be remembered. For example, let's talk about Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen, a song I don't particularly like that ruled the airwaves last year. In my books, I think the weaknesses in the song are the bland instrumentation and the crummy lyrics. But Carly Rae Jepsen manages to salvage things with some real personality and complete sincerity in her delivery. Now let's compare this to Taylor Swift's 22, a song with a decent hook, but terrible lyrics and a complete lack of any sincere feeling, so the song just doesn't work. That's why songs like I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys is such a great pop song, and a song like Selena Gomez's Come and Get It is such a dud that'll be forgotten in a year. And when you go back through pop music, it's extremely hard to find songs that would fit all the criteria. Hell, even going into the independent scene, I'd have a hard time locating songs that nail all three of these categories consistently. So with all of that in mind, let's talk about the self-titled EP from pop rock act The Brilliancy, and why it's probably going to make it on my list as one of the best albums of the year. Yeah, I'm dead serious about this. For the 5 or 6 of you who have read my blog since last year, you might remember that I talked about The Brilliancy when they released their 2-song demo disc at the concert I attended. And from the very beginning, I was struck by how this band was consistently nailing all the little elements that so many other pop rock bands get wrong. So when they released their EP, I was definitely curious to see how good the band would sound on record. I already knew they put on a great show live, so I had high expectations going in that this EP would sound pretty damn solid, but you never know what happens. And for once, I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't kidding about the Brilliancy EP likely landing on my list of the best albums of the year, because as a pop rock act in 2013, you're not going to find something much better. Everything that I liked about the band live and on their previous cut has been refined here, and they even took steps to tackling a few of the problems I mentioned in the previous review. And while I said that the Brilliancy sounded a lot like mid to late period Jimmy Eat World in my previous review, I can now say, having actually listened to the new album from Jimmy Eat World, the Brilliancy are easily head and shoulders above them. So let's start with instrumentation and production, the former in which the Brilliancy have always stood out. Unlike most pop rock acts, they're not afraid of guitar or drum solos, and they're talented enough to let such solos stand for themselves on the record. And while the production has rounded off some of the rougher edges you hear live, the positioning of Brendan Friel's strumming in the mix to support Austin Lathley's vocals rather than overpowering them is exactly what the Brilliancy consistently gets right, and what Jimmy Eat World consistently gets wrong. In fact, no member is overtly overshadowed, which leads to a surprisingly egalitarian mix, where Friel's crisp guitar work is balanced out by Rob Rocco's superb drumming and Brad Merrifield's solid work on bass. Now, if I were to nitpick, I do think the band could afford to let a few more of the harsh edges through, and I do wish the vocal harmonies were slightly higher up in the mix, but overall, I can't complain when the music is this good. So let's move on to Austin Leadley's vocals, and I have to repeat what I've already said. I like this guy's delivery. His emotions feel genuine and heartfelt and sincere in a way that's been severely lacking on modern radio, and yet his vocals still have enough polish and good technique to be commendable. It's definitely a solid fit for the EP's upbeat and sunny tone without becoming nasally obnoxious or crass, which can become a major problem with some pop rock acts. That being said, I am curious to see what will happen if the band chooses to write some songs that are darker or less optimistic, because while Leadley's smooth tenor does fit the tone here, I'd actually like to see how he'd be able to handle some more emotionally complex material. Now granted, he does a very good job with everything he puts forward on record. I'd like to see more. That's a compliment. And with that, let's talk about the lyrics and that particular deeper thematic content. The one area that in the past I've thought the Brilliancy needed to slightly improve. No, don't get me wrong, it's never been bad or offensive or even boring. Many other songs had fit into convenient pop music archetypes and really didn't rise that far above it, at least in terms of lyrical content, with the most egregious example being Don't Give Up, which was a basic self-esteem anthem in every sense of the word. Once again, it wasn't bad, let me make that absolutely clear, but it didn't stand out in the same way. So I was more than pleasantly surprised to not only find out that Don't Give Up wasn't included on the EP, but had been replaced by Hold On, a song that fits the self-esteem anthem but injects it with a bit more complexity. Instead of coddling the song's target audience, it's more of a tough love song, telling them they're going to go through hell, but they're going to make it through it anyway. It's amazing how such a little change in presentation makes a song so much better, and I really dug the approach. And the song that follows it, Not Over You Just Yet, is probably the most lyrically complex song that the Brilliancy have put on record yet. Initially, I was skeptical of how much I would like this song, as it falls into the Not Over You song template that can get wearisome really fast. But there are two factors that I'd argue make it significantly better. First is the choice to cast the song's protagonist as the reason why things went wrong. But unlike Cher Lloyd's execrable Want You Back, it's smart enough to frame said protagonist as admitting it's his fault that the relationship ended and feeling genuinely regretful. Secondly, and more importantly, it makes the risky choice to show him not winning his girl back. It casts the relationship as over with no going back, and that adds real emotional punch to the song. It's almost country music-esque in its portrayal of sadness, and I applaud the Brilliancy in taking that sort of risk to write that sort of thing. And yet, the rest of the EP is balanced out by the energetic and expansive pop rock that they do so well. I spoke highly of Stay and Can't Take It Away as my favorite songs of their live set, and thus I couldn't help but smile when they were the opening tracks of the EP. Those, along with Not Over You Just Yet, are definitely my favorites, although I could talk all day about how every element of this EP works as incredibly solid pop rock. And what's all the more exciting is that with the inclusion of Not Over You Just Yet and Hold On, I see promising signs that the songwriting is there for some truly compelling and very listenable tracks, and I genuinely want more. So, to summarize, I highly recommend the Brilliancy EP. It's solid, it's fun, it's incredibly energetic, it's a perfect summer album, and there's a standard of quality and polish that speaks volumes of their talent. And while I have a few small nitpicks I've already mentioned, the majority of this EP just leaves me wanting more. And I like with any other incredibly talented act, I want these guys to blow up like nobody's business. For those of you who follow my stuff, you know I don't say this about many acts. Trust me, people, they are definitely the real deal. Check them out. So, thanks for watching. If you get a chance, I'm going to put the link to the Brilliancy's website in the description below, so you should definitely take a look. Also, you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.